So I'm going to show you how to edit portraits to get them to be like nice, moody, saturated, but nice analogous color schemes. So you go from images out of camera like this to images in Lightroom like this. So if you're new to this channel, you're going to find a lot of videos about like how we use AI, how we edit, and how we run some shoots. We do a lot of photography for businesses, and then some with, more traditional like weddings, engagements, family photo sessions. But today I'm going to show you how I edit portraits for clients who want like a little bit more of a moody look, some dark brown tones, those kinds of things. So let's get into Lightroom. All right, so we've just hopped into Lightroom Classic and we are looking at a photo shoot that we did for a client. And I'm going to show you how I edit this to be a little bit more moody and dramatic and color grade it. There we go. All right, so we're zoomed in, so we have a little bit of a better view here. And let's talk about our histogram. Now, when we expose for our images and we're shooting raw, so if you don't see your histogram, you can click up here and it'll expand. So when we're shooting for our images, we want to expose for the middle, and it's okay to expose to the left a little bit here in this little highlighted section. It's okay to expose to the right in this little highlighted section. As long as you're not clipping, you can still recover some detail, but it's really best practice to try to expose in the middle so that you have the full range of options when trying to pull out details without getting any sort of artifacting or banding or anything like that. But we're close. You see our reds and our green channels here specifically within our histogram are pretty close, but they're not clipping, which means we can recover some detail there. So as you can tell, this image is just a little bit washed out. So what I want to do is just create a little bit more contrast in terms of light to dark. Contrast is all we think about when we're editing photos, at least how I like to think about it. So our whites are our lights are pretty close to being blown out. So we're going to kind of leave those, but we are going to add just a little bit more to our shadows and really to our midtones, because we really want to create like some exaggeration there, some separation, some contrast between dark and light without losing some of the roll off, which I think we've done right here. So if you want to see the before and after, you can click this eyeball on the tone curve, which is what I did here. Not quite an curve, but still adding some more drama. And then what I can do here is I can come up to the highlights and I can bring those down a little bit too. And we're getting some color back in there. All right, so I'm going to leave this probably around like a -70 or so. And we can always come back and revisit this in the basic panels tab. Let's just see what this does. Let me zoom out real quick. Let's see what this does to our shadows. Okay. I'm actually going to leave our shadows at like maybe +25. So let me see before and after real quick. I'm constantly toggling before and after. As you can see, we've recovered a little bit more detail in the background there. And in parts of her hair. So let's go down and we'll play around with our color here first. And when I said we talk about contrast, we talk about contrast from light to dark, but a lot of people don't remember to think about our color wheels when we think about contrast from light to dark. So we want to bring out like a nice, healthy skin tone. So I'm going to go down to our color grading panel, and I'm going to grab the midtones. I'm going to bring them over to the orange, right where it's about to go into the red. I'm going to kind of stay away from the yellow there. And I'm just going to bring this up. So what it's going to do is it's going to skew things more towards that range in our midtones. So let's look at the before and after. So we have like a little bit more of like a healthy, glow, to the undertones in the skin. Now, in order to create some more separation there, I'm going to bring it around to the opposite side of the color wheel. Again, contrast. The opposite side of the color wheel creates contrast in color. So what we're doing here is just bringing this down a little bit, and I want to keep this middle ring on the dot. I don't want to go too far past because then you get this weird teal, cast to everything. So I'm going to bring it here. We could play and move it a little bit. I'm going to keep it right there. I like it there. So again, here's our before and our after. And so all that's doing, you can see in the greens a little bit more, and in some of the beiges, right? We're getting a little bit more blues in them. And then our highlights, I'm also going to bring those up to just a little bit more orange. And we're going to bring this up here. So it's very similar to what we got going on up at the top. So here's our before and our after. And color grading is just a game of percentages and small gains using kind of like these micro adjustments. And the reason that this reads as moody is because the browns live in these kind of areas that we're pulling out here, and the oranges, the reds, the yellows. So usually when we think about highlights and shadows, we think of it in purely like luminance values, like dark to light. There's a lot of contrast in color, and you can see that here by what we've pointed out in the shadows and the highlights. So you're creating contrast in that manner as well. And you can see that our subject is beginning to pop. So in here, what we're going to do is continue to create some more micro separation by breaking down, these larger sections of the color wheel into their smaller subcategories. Going with the orange, our saturation, I'm going to boost that just a tiny bit, maybe like +10, right? And that's going to, again, just all of the oranges in the image are going to become a little bit more saturated. If you want to bring a little bit more light to the skin tones, you can adjust the luminance of the orange channel specifically, like by bringing it up here, right? And I'm going to do maybe like a +10 there. So now, again, more contrast on the skin compared to all of the other colors here. Not just, the orange where it's kind of meeting reds and yellows, but the more isolated channel of orange. And then if we wanted to, we can skew that color someplace different, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skew our background, the hue from like a pure yellow, and I'm going to make it shift a little bit more towards the orange. And then I'm going to bring the luminance down just a little bit and our saturation down just a little bit. And this is, again, we're seeing a little bit more of a mood going, and this is a little bit more preference, so you can keep it back at yellow if you want, but I'm trying to get rid of some of those greens in the background. So you can see here, we've gotten rid of some of the yellows, but I was more focused on trying to like get rid of some of those greens up in, this area up here. So before, after. Okay. So let's zoom out again. Let's zoom into just this section here. And then what we're going to do is go to the greens. And what we can do is we can shift the greens. And this is going to be a little bit more down here. So we can shift the greens more towards, teals and blues. We can shift them a little bit more towards the yellows. I kind of like the yellow here. I'm going to shift it over this way. We can bring the saturation up. We can bring it down. I'm going to actually bring it down. Because I don't want a lot of extra color in here, so I want to limit it. I like bringing the luminance up in this just a little bit, maybe like a +10. So let's look back at our full image again, and here's the after, here's the before, and this is just playing with the color mixer. This isn't playing with these global controls so much. You can see how much more of a difference it makes by trying to create more contrast in the image, by skewing everything a little bit closer to the warmer side and just leaving shadows down there in the cool side. So if we shut that off and on, right, our shadows stay cool, which is a really cool feature of the color grading using this shadow tool here. Blues, there aren't too many blues here, except there's like a bit of a cast to her pants. So what I'm going to do, and in real life, those were white. So what I'm actually going to do is bring the saturation down so those become white again. And you can see, because we shifted a lot of the blues out of the greens there, they're not being affected either. So before, after. So now her pants are nice and white. We can go even further with this in just color grading by coming down to our calibration. So our calibration is essentially for, calibrating for your camera. So let's say like you have a Sony camera and it naturally skews a little bit in like tint to the magenta. And so you can calibrate for your camera on that, but we can also use it to color grade. And so what we can see here in these red primaries, and this is where we're going to see the most impact in some of the browns, right, to make it nice and moody. is we can play around with the saturation and the hue in that there. So I'll show you, what we could do with that by going to the extreme sides. We're going extreme red, extreme kind of yellow. It's kind of in the middle. I'm going to push it over just a little bit, maybe like -7, -10 area. And we could play with our saturations within that channel as well. But I'm not going to play with saturation there. I am going to play with this green channel here. Just a little bit, probably +2. Not really a big change there, but we can saturate or desaturate this depending on your preferences. Same with those blues. So I'm actually going to desaturate some of the blues a little bit. Really like when we do maybe like a -14 there. So here's the after, before. So just tiny little details. We're recovering a little bit more in some of these highlights back here. You can see. Oh, if I turn the calibration on and off, we recover just a little bit more, right? I like it because it makes our subject pop. So I would say this is a pretty good color calibration, but there's a little, real quick, if you're finding this video helpful at all, would you please click the thumbs up button? Let me know in the comments what was helpful, or subscribe. Those are 3 free ways that you can help us grow our channel. Thanks. A few other things that we're going to do here for basic photo manipulation things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on her face here. So these edits here that I'm going to do the face are going to make some more colors pop, but only in little spots that we want. So this is all part of color grading photos as well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to wait for this to detect people. If you have like the newer version of Lightroom, we can detect the person, and then it can detect a facial feature, so you don't have to go in and paint them out by hand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the eye, sclera, and the iris and pupil, and I'm going to create a mask there. And what I'm going to do is I am going to increase the saturation just maybe like plus 15, about thereabout amount. Cool. And then I'm going to bring the shadows up in there a little bit, and look how much of a difference that makes. And now what I'm going to do is highlight just the sclera, and I'm going to bring the saturation down quite a bit to make them feel nice and white. And here's our before and our after, and those eyes pop now even when we are to zoom out. So here's our before and our after, and she is real, eyes pop out, she's feeling a little bit warm. And then what I'm also going to do here is zoom into the teeth, and I'm going to do a similar edit there. I'm going to select the mask, new. I'm going to, you could brush out the teeth individually, but this new select people feature is really great. And I'm going to grab the teeth. I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to desaturate the teeth. And that is going to make a huge difference. Bring the shadows up just a tiny bit. And then I don't want to make them look fake, but I do want them to look nice and kind of like pop there. So here's our before and our after. Before, after. Another thing I'm going to do is a similar thing, but with the lips. So select people, select person, select lips. Because we are naturally drawn to facial features, I'm going to bump up the saturation just a tiny bit. So now let's look at the after and the before, and we can zoom out. And here is the before and the after. So I hope that this was helpful. And if you did find it helpful, I would just ask you to maybe check out another video, share this with somebody who edits photos on the regular, check out the link in our description for retouch for me, or subscribe, because that is a free way to help out our channel. Thank you so much.